I'd like to welcome all of you to this week's session of the Lunchbox Philosophers. Doubtless we'll have others joining in. And to those who are tuning in to the recording later, a very special welcome. The topic of this week's discussion is particularly interesting, the philosophy of pandemics, with a special focus on philosophy and the coronavirus. You know, there's been so much hype and misunderstanding about the coronavirus. There are many PhDs from the University of WhatsApp who think they are qualified to deliver judgment. And there are many people, ignorant and otherwise, even highly educated people, who take these WhatsApp messages as their Bible and even act on them. Ooh, that person there has COVID-19, we've got to be really careful. And that one's funeral, you know, the funeral procession is passing through. Let's pelt it with stones because the corpse has the coronavirus and we might get infected. You know, it's amazing the levels of hysteria in India and doubtless elsewhere in the world, where people, instead of viewing the person with corona with compassion, act on these stereotypes and rumors promulgated in the social media. Does anyone have anything to say about that? COVID-19, the medical reality versus the hype and the misreporting, the falsehoods. Ramachandran?
I would just like to add that it's one thing to view something from a government perspective, from when you are even from management perspective, and when we view it from, it's basically like the top down, top to the bottom, or bottom to the top approach. As you know, we're all basically common people. So we have the advantage of reading newspapers, articles, accumulating and assimilating all of these information, and ultimately coming to a, all of us are biased in one way or the other. So we will, come with our opinion, which will be biased in one way or the other. So that is from, our perspective, from our side. There is the other side of management, where the only thing that you have to ensure is what happens to to control the epidemic or the pandemic. That is their only focus. You cannot, you can't afford to look at it in any other way. If you
but the point is, are we controlling the pandemic in medically responsible ways, or are we acting on superstition, WhatsApp rumors, and simple falsehoods on WhatsApp, Twitter, and Facebook? Not to mention the print media and television. Because very often on TV, for example, a lot of Channel 9 news is based on the hysterical misperception of a moment. Reporting a here and now piece of news, which is inflected with the reporter's own sense of panic, rather than a responsible reportage of what's actually happening on ground, medically and socially. Ujjwal, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I think one of even the critiques of the current situation by Agamben, for example, on the state of exception that governments use, he kind of uses this conspiratorial view, which is that governments have created this problem in part because they have, instilled in all of us this sense of wanting to be protected. We want to be saved. So it's almost as if it's set up to be this way. And we want to be saved. And now the government comes in, and obviously all the repercussions of that with respect to what comes with the state of emergency, with respect to rights, et cetera, those are all offshoots of this. But I think there's that accusation, which is that maybe it is all a part of sort of this perception which is skewed, and everyone fears the pandemic because they're sort of predisposed to fear it, and it's part of this sort of infrastructure that's already there in a way.
Well, before dismissing what contemporary Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben says, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the fact that he is one of the most significant philosophers on the European scene writing today. The man is well into his 70s and still very active. He is best known for a little book that he wrote many years ago called State of Exception. And in that, he talks about the state of exception or emergency that is invoked by right-wing and other autocrats. He mentions Hitler, he mentions others, to justify declaring a state of emergency. You know, that there is a state, this country is under siege, either from an external enemy or from a pandemic or something else, which justifies the suspension of constitutional rights and an assumption of dictatorial authority. Hitler, long before he became a dictator, as early as 1934, when he was the democratically elected Reich Chancellor, actually promulgated a proclamation for the protection and welfare of the German people, which in effect took away their rights. And see, no one really complained seriously, except for a fringe opposition, when you invoke something that terrifies people. George Bush, under 9/11, introduced so many draconian pieces of legislation, like the Patriot Act, pretty much stripping anyone held at Guantanamo Bay of any kind of human rights. They were not citizens, they were not non-citizens, they were not hostages, they were not prisoners of war, they were not bound by the Geneva Convention. They could be tortured as pleased in Guantanamo Bay and also other prisons like Abu Ghraib overseas. So a state of exception is always a very dangerous thing because it allows us to see permissible exceptions to democracy. And Agamben's other concern is that once a state of exception is declared, it's very hard to snap back to normalcy. There's been so much hype and so much fear and so much government control, some of it irresponsible, exercised by different governments since this emergency began in February, March, that it may be very difficult to go back to an unmasked old norm even after a vaccine has been discovered. They may find excuses to keep it in place. There are other viruses. You still need to be very careful. There could, as Agamben pointed out, be continuing bans on large-scale gatherings, especially political gatherings, oppositional gatherings. You know, you can't have Shaheen Bagh too often anymore because, and of course, what's going to be cited is the health threat. And look at what's happened with airports since George Bush. We submit so cheerfully to near sexual harassment. Our crotches are fondled. Our bodies we are strip searched. They run their scanner over different parts of our bodies with impunity. And normally we would scream #MeToo, but we take it all lying down because it's all for our own good. It's all for our own safety. There's the wicked terrorists lurking in the bushes. They haven't got a single terrorist or very few through this multi-trillion-dollar process of airport security, but it's a major industry and one that severely curtails civil rights. I remember a time, Vasanthi, when I used to walk up to the tarmac at the Dum Dum Airport in Calcutta to greet Poppy. You know, I would just, there's no security there. You could just walk right through.
Yeah.
At least for domestic flights. I mean, international flights, you would have to explain to customs what you were doing. But even there, if you just say, well, I'm there to meet my mother or whatever, they would probably let you through. It was a very, very informal, it's almost inconceivable today. People look at me as if I'm on drugs when I say that, because it's impossible to conceive unless you're a VVIP. You know, if you're the son of the prime minister or the daughter of the president, then you might be able to get away with it. But it would have to be prearranged and all of that. The point here is it's very difficult to go back to what existed before the state of exception. So the dictatorial exception to democracies continues. And this Agamben does see as the real danger. Mm-hmm. And of course, in Italy, Ujjwal, it's not a conspiracy. In Italy, they had an almost total lockdown. In Hungary, Viktor Orban declared a state of emergency, like Indira Gandhi many years ago in India. It was an actual state of emergency declared. he took over total powers. The parliament was suspended. People thought Orban would never return to democracy, but democracy is limpingly back, I gather, in Hungary, because there was talk of his ending the emergency at the end of May, when he felt the pandemic was sufficiently under control. But he need not have done that. And the sheeple would have agreed just because they're so terrified of this virus. Vasanti, any reflections on state of exception?
It's soaking in.
You're just soaking it in.
Yes.
Yeah, but let's also look at the facts of this disease for a minute. 2.4% of the infected population dies. It's a very small percentage. Do you realize that TB has a huge percentage of cases? The Spanish flu claimed far more lives.
Yeah.
You realize that, don't you? Worldwide, the average is about 6 to 8% maximum. Of course, you know, when I say average, I mean that I also allow that in specific circumstances, like Northern Italy when it first broke out, or New York when it first broke out, the fatality percentage was much higher and included young and old alike, but primarily old, especially senior citizens with highly compromised immune systems and comorbidities. But the fact of the matter is that overall, the fatality rate is a lot lower, a lot more modest than, let's say, for SARS, which is the older brother, common, very closely linked virus. This virus is not a mystery. It's part of the SARS family, the SARS coronavirus. And a lot of people, there's a lot of media hype about this is a novel virus. No one knows what it is. Well, baloney. We know a lot about it, and it's very closely linked to the SARS virus. There is even a branch of the coronavirus family that creates the common cold. So it's not that unlinked from diseases that we know rather well as we sniffle our way through the winter. It is an upper respiratory disease like many of them, and it has a fatality rate. Certainly we should be careful. I'm not suggesting throw away your mask. I'm not a Trumpster. I'm not a follower of Donald Trump, throwing away the mask and saying this is all baloney and this is all bullshit. The coronavirus is just the flu. It's not just the flu. It's a little more serious, but wear your mask, take your precautions, keep your social distancing or physical distancing. I hate the term social distancing, and we'll see why. Keep your mask on, keep the physical distancing, take all precautions necessary, and then just accept what comes, because I don't think there's any possibility of dealing with corona or any other disease any other way, unless you want to stay in bed and pull up the covers and never go out again, which I refuse to do.
I want to add a few things.
Depends on whether this is a real test of whether you're a free spirit or whether you are someone who's at heart very timid.
Well, I agree with a lot of what you said, actually. When I mentioned the conspiratorial sort of the theory sense, I actually just meant to say that that's what it's sort of referred to when people talk about it. I didn't agree with that characterization necessarily.
Right.
I think what a lot of what you said can also be connected in some ways. In my mind, I'm trying to connect it to, I think, the Foucault's idea about the medical gaze, which is sort of this power dynamic in today's world.
Right.
I can better explain it with the example of a panopticon, which is a simpler example. I think then medical gaze can come later. It's this idea that there is a prison in the center, and there are lights on, right? And it's darkness all around. So there are guards all around that prison, and there are prisoners in the prison, and the guards can see from the dark. So the prisoner doesn't really know when the guard is looking. So even if there are no guards, the prisoner will think that someone is looking. So it's got a chilling effect on the person. So it is the gaze. It is sort of the way we go about even comprehending something. It's sort of this authority of knowledge, of prescribing knowledge. I think it has some of that is the reason why when you mentioned about George W. Bush and all the exaggerated precautions afterwards, I think why people willingly accept all that, I think there is a relationship there, something like that. And you can apply that to the medical gaze, where nowadays we're so scared, right? Anything that a doctor says, we will follow it till death, because we cannot move away from it. We forget about challenging the doctor. I mean, I'm not saying
we submit meekly to tracking apps, for example.
exactly.
Like the Ayushman app. There are banks now who insist that you have that before they allow you to walk in. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And these are ways for the government to keep track of you, to surveil you. And the point is, the process of quarantining and or taking someone in for treatment is so punitive looking and sounding in India and elsewhere. The person who is COVID positive is treated like a leper, socially and morally. In some ways, neighbors and family and friends think it's his or her fault. And whether it's their fault or not, they are ostracized, marginalized. No one wants to have anything to do with them. Hospitals don't want to admit them. Priests don't want to cremate or bury them, and so on and so forth. So it's a terrible situation. So the incentive to submit to a surveillance process is much less in this situation, because you're not treated like a patient, you're treated like a criminal. And yet surely, Ujjwal, that is Foucault's point. Michel Foucault, great 20th century philosopher, and really forerunner of Giorgio Agamben. Agamben has been called the leading Foucault disciple of our own century and the new millennium. But Foucault talks about this in Discipline and Punish, the panopticon, a concept that he borrowed from the 19th century utilitarian philosopher Jeremy Bentham, the idea of an all-seeing eye in prison, where the prisoners' every movement, even their body scratching, is noted by this gaze, the gaze of the camera, the gaze of the lens, the gaze of Big Brother, the gaze of the prison guard, or in this case, the gaze of the doctor, well-meaning perhaps, or the gaze of BBMP and the municipal authorities in India, who they are really not medically qualified to track me or surveil me or pronounce judgment on my health or my responsibility or lack of it in contracting this disease. So the point here is that it creates a culture of surveillance. It creates a culture where freedom is lost. It creates a tracking culture, and it creates a culture of the monstrous medical gaze and more generally the disciplinary gaze. Foucault also talks about how with leprosy and the plague, this process of quarantine was really a process of containment and cordoning off. In very specific disciplinary ways, you could not stir. Every part of your body was imprinted. And you had to function within certain boundaries, just as we do during the lockdown. The lockdown is a perfect example of what Foucault is talking about, because it really is a disciplinary process. You can be arrested by the police for defying a curfew. It's no longer a medical matter, it becomes a police issue. Violation of quarantine is a serious police matter, especially in countries like India. Okay, this meeting, I understand, no longer has a time limit, and so that's very good. Perhaps, Ujjwal, you have magical charms that you are unaware of. Yeah. Perhaps your triple IT aura follows you whither thou goest. But I will not comment on that further because Zoom has prying ears and eyes. But
I just want to say, I don't want all these ideas to go unchallenged, because if anyone disagrees with us on these, whatever has been said, please speak out, because actually I don't agree with everything that has been said. I mean, I can take all sides. I try to and play devil's advocate. So what are some of the arguments against what we've just said if someone disagrees with us?
Yes, I mean, the point of this was not to create a new orthodoxy or a new text which says, this is the way things are, folks. Live with it. If you don't, you are one of the Philistines. No, we're not passing judgment on anyone who disagrees with us. Disagreement is grist for the mill. We encourage a free forum of ideas. I mean, that's what the Lunchbox Philosophers has always been about. So please feel free to agree partially, agree totally, disagree completely, disagreed partially, as the case might be. Have we anyone else on board? Gargi, are you there? We are full.
Yeah, please speak out.
Please speak out.
So
Don't be shy.
let me just give an example. Yeah.
Actually, I closed my audio because it creates disturbance when someone is speaking.
Can we have someone else? We can't hear her properly. So just for an example, just to play devil's advocate, against sir, I can raise a small point. The point would be, well, this is a very serious business. If we don't take action, if we take action, not enough action, what if it's a threat to civilization? Because the group that is targeted by this, mostly by this disease, is elderly, and today the population, most of the world's populations, the ratio of elderly people is very high because in modern times. So one could argue that it could have, if we don't take it seriously, because what can be drawn from what Sir has talked about? Yes, those are good points, but it can also bring out a certain cavalierness, maybe, to not take the disease seriously. So someone could argue that.
Yes, which is why I was very clear. I mean, I qualified what I said by saying this does not mean throw away your mask. By all means, take precautions, but don't swallow the hype. I'm very glad you brought up senior citizens. Yes, that is a real threat, undoubtedly. But are they protected tenderly by the government and by society? Not at all. This has actually raised further discrimination against senior citizens. Yes. Do you realize there are stores, banks, and so forth that will not allow senior citizens in? You realize there was a lawsuit in the Karnataka High Court, and the central and state governments had to answer because there was a senior citizen, feisty person, who filed a suit saying we are being discriminated against in the name of protecting us. And of course, the government climbed down hastily and said, no, this is just a strong suggestion that they not go out. Of course, if there's an emergency or they need to go out or whatever else, they're welcome to do so, blah, blah. No one is chaining them inside. But the point here is very often it is taken as, and there was another piece of disastrous, well-meaning advice for senior citizens that I encountered earlier, and that was stay at home. Don't meet any relatives. Don't be in touch with anyone. We're doing this for your own good, which I thought was ludicrous. The senior citizens of all people need the touchy-feely, need to know that there are people who care, that there are people who are still in touch, people who are still listening to them, people who take the trouble of calling them once in a while, which you do, and making sure they're okay. So this is a disaster. The way in which these rules, supposedly, as I said, they're well-meaning, to protect senior citizens, actually end up discriminating against them. We have to be very, very careful not to overdo the nanny state, Ujjwal. The state is not my nanny. I don't need my bottom wiped by it. Thank you very much.
Please speak up. Yeah, whoever it is.
Yeah. So adding on to the to what Raj said, it's I think recently I came across this thing over Facebook as well. I mean, although a lot of fake, news is a lot of fake news is going around with Facebook, but there's just a lot of people who are in, let's say, the acting industry, and people who are artists, who work from gigs to gigs to earn money from paycheck to paycheck. And a lot of these people are below above 50 or 60 years, and they are raising their voices against the discrimination discrimination against them in getting work. Like you would have noticed that now in the daily soap industry or the acting industry, a lot of actors are getting back to work. But now all the people who are above a certain age are being denied work just because they are even like those people are just as talented, they are just as passionate, they are just as energetic, but they're denied work, and they're like these people are coming forward that just because of our age we are denied opportunities in the name of Corona, and that is not doing any good to them. I mean, if you want to implement rules, do it in a way that serves us better, not in a way that, take away our livelihoods. We are like, these are the people who live from paycheck to paycheck. They are not able to pay their rents in Mumbai now anymore.
Right. Yeah. No. And I also think that this discrimination, as I call it, against senior citizens caused by the corona pandemic is part of a larger picture of discrimination, of ageism and so forth, which we won't get into because that would take us too far afield. Ujjwal, can we get to the next topic?
Yeah. Before we do that, just for brevity, if anyone wants to speak, can you raise your hand? So there's an option on Zoom to raise your hand. So it allows me to see who wants to speak. So I see Himanshu wants to speak, so he can speak before we move on.
Can you see me now? Yeah, wait. Nope. Okay, light is not good yet.
Yes, we can see you. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I was going to say, the thing that is giving power to these authorities and everyone who has some sort of decision-making power, they are using the uncertainty around this issue. Like we don't know how corona would turn out to be, what all effects it has, and it's still being every other day there's new discovery that it can cause some sort of lung issues, long-term lung issues, and initially the mortality rate was supposed to be far lower than what we know it is now. So and even people in power are using this uncertainty to their own. Some of them would be like, no, it is. They're cherry picking what they want to from these results. There is this very even the scientific community is kind of divided on this at some places, but yeah, overall, although it is being considered to be something serious, and we should do all of the physical distancing and all the things we are doing, but then the scientific community is at a lot of places is divided. There were initially, I remember I was reading an article. There were scientists who said all this lockdown is unnecessary. This disease is not as deadly as it is being shown by the media. Yeah, maybe that was correct, but up to some extent, their claims have turned out to be wrong in the sense the mortality rate is right now. What I see is much higher than it was at that time.
Yeah, but at the same time, Himanshu, more lockdowns are not the answer. Let's remember that it's caused a lot of agony for migrant laborers, workers, the unorganized sector, small businesses particularly. The Tatas, the Birlas, and the Ambanis are fine. They're doing much better than 5 years, and they can do quite well. I mean, there's also calamity capitalism that benefits from crisis. Yeah. But the point here is that there are many who've been thrown out by these lockdowns. I think the point is to stress, even police if necessary, things like the wearing of masks and social distancing in public places. That's what you need to police, not lock down everything. That's correct. I think a focused, targeted lockdown like they had in New Zealand. Jacinda Ardern is a tremendous prime minister there. She had a focused 7-week lockdown. And during that 7-week lockdown, she tracked the contacts of all those infected, and bingo, she had the disease under control. That's very different than, certain other countries that I can mention but won't, which have lockdowns and then think, well, it'd be a nice idea to do another lockdown just for another week or so for old time's sake. And they think that's efficient governance. So I think a lockdown per se doesn't bring down any pandemic. I think what you need is targeted lockdowns for a short period of time, and thereafter enforcing, public health measures like the wearing of masks and physical distancing. Yeah. But welcome Sharda, Gargi, Anita, Himanshu. Let's see who else is here. Deepak is here in the woodwork somewhere. And Professor Vish, are you with us? I don't see a video, but I see. And Jaya is here, I think. Hello. Would you make yourself known? You don't have to lurk in the shadows. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Raj. Hi. This is Anita.
Hi, Anita. Greetings. I'm glad I'm seeing you finally.
Yeah, joining in after a long time of threatening
Very
to
good.
join.
Excellent. Yes. And
So-
Professor Vish is here. Ujwal, I suspect that Professor Vish is the magical charm that makes it an unlimited conversation. Whither his wanders, there we need have no fear.
I think so too, yes. All right, so I can see some people have their hands raised. So Ram, could you quickly mention your point? And after that, Ms. Gargi also. Ram, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I'd just like to add 2 points. One is that all scientific experiments, they started with, a kind of noble intention, irrespective of how it goes. Then they're subject to political, political viewpoints, opinions, and all sorts of, groups coming in. Then the second thing is democracy is subject to authoritative powers. Obviously, the example that stands out is Hitler, but there have all and the emergency. But apart from that, there have always been times in the name of it can look as if it is really a sort of how do I put it? It might look as if everything is going well, but you look at the underlying facts, look at the bottom line of the government, irrespective of which country it is in, there will be a certain authoritative power that rules. And in this kind of a pandemic, people always look to some. We were talking about discussing about Foucault's case, and it kind of brings me, it kind of takes me to this, that some look at religion in the same way. Some look at religion in the same way, where it's God and God's case. So don't do a mistake, because you'll have to face the consequences and the repercussions based on that. And that is religion. But the same thing, instead of religion, can be put into a political system. It can be put into an intellectual system. There is intellectual hegemony going on, and you can put it into the cinema industry. So there is everywhere there is this kind of authoritative thing. When we look at it, just by what the newspapers say, unless we go to the root, get our hands dirty, get our feet dirty, do all the the dirty work, it's really hard to understand whether there is actually authoritative stuff going on or not.
Okay, so that's great. I think you briefly touched on biopolitics there. That was also Foucault's idea, which says that, well, with modernity, politics and biology are almost interwoven, and there is a medicalization of politics as much as there is politicization of medicine. And now we almost talk about populations in terms of segments as a result of this. Okay, so moving from that, I think we can now touch briefly on the discussion of space, the production of space. I think it would be very helpful for all of us. There is a French philosopher by the name of Henri Lefebvre. He's an intellectual, considered a neo-Marxist, and was an existential philosopher on the left. He talks about the production of space. Well, before he gave this very famous theory about the concept of lived space, he critiqued the alienating conditions of everyday life with the advent of modernity. He thought of this everydayness as a soul-destroying feature of modernity. And he argued against the banality of the subway, work, sleep sort of a lifestyle. His suggestion is to seize and act on all moments of revelation. Moments are moments of emotional clarity and self-presence towards a goal of self-fulfillment. They're experiences of revelation, sort of deja vu kind of sensations, especially, for example, of love and commitment. They cannot be reappropriated by consumer capitalism and commodified. However, they can be relived. Lefebvre looked at urban environments as the context of everyday life, and he talks about the reproduction of social relations of production. So he talks about something called, he makes a distinction between natural space, an absolute sense of space, a space that already exists, and social space, which he claims to be constructed, a social construction made, given by humans. So let me just talk a little bit about the production of space itself. So Lefebvre uses a three-part dialectics to explain his theory. Well, a dialectics, for those of you who do not know, it's sort of this idea of putting two oxymoronic concepts together, and there is some sort of a symbiosis between them, and there's a tension and struggle between them. And there are two types of dialectics. Before I move on to the production of space, that I just want to be clear about. One is the Hegelian type of dialectic, which says that, well, two things that are the opposite of, two opposite things, oxymoronic. They come together and they form, they create new things. There is, that tension creates a new thing. Whereas Plato, a philosopher before that, would say that no, if there is a contradiction like that, then we reach a state of aporia. So just using that concept in this production of space. So Lefebvre gave a three-part dialectics to make us understand of this theory of social space. He talked about three types of spaces. One, the perceived space. He talked about, this is the space of everyday practice and perception, where popular action and outlook come into play. Then he talked about conceived space, which is the representation, or where the theories of space are expressed. So for example, the professional class will give you a sense in a society, the professional class, the urban planners, etc., etc. They create space, or in the business of creating space, and use theoretical underpinnings. They create the conceived space of what sort of ought to be. However, there is this third part of the dialectic that he talked about, which is the lived space. Now, this is where his theory turns into a phenomenological direction, which means that he wants to talk about the perspective of each individual's experience of space. He talks about this spatial imagination of the time. So for example, if you look at any any society and you look at it historically at a particular time, he says that you cannot understand the society solely based on, well, it consisted of a population of these people, that people, and this geography, etc. However, he says, without understanding the social space, which is created as a result of these three dialectics, we cannot understand the power dynamics of a society, because this production of space, which is a result of these three dialectics and their interaction, and it's this is controlled by a sort of hegemony that controls the production of space, and that gives a sense of power in a society. So this is very important to understand any society. So he said that new social relations demand a new space, and vice versa. So the question in this is, how do we perceive space during a pandemic, working from isolation, from the privacy of our own homes? How different is our lived experience when we work from home? Before we answer that question, or try to, there is another theory of space, which is Gaston Bachelard. He talks about the dialectics of inside out. Inside out, outside, inside outside. These two polar opposites. So he talks about it in his work, The Poetic Space. He looked at architecture through the lens of the lived experience. Again,
excuse me a second, just a second, Ujjwal. There are people who've been raising their hand. In fact, Professor Vish got a little upset because we didn't recognize his hand. Let us make sure that we do.
I actually didn't.
Is Professor Vish? I'm sure you didn't see him, but is he back? He just
Well,
called
he's
me.
written on the chat. He's written on the chat, so we all know what his problem was.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are people who are waiting to be heard. So yeah, can we take a few questions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Does anyone have a question or a comment? I'm sorry to have interrupted you, Ujjwal, but you know.
Professor Vish, please go ahead. I didn't see his hand. I may have missed it. That's my mistake.
Yeah, there he is back.
The concept of hand on Zoom is
No,
to, there is a functionality on the app to raise hand. I think Vish sir was not aware that, we can click an option of raising hand on Zoom.
So Professor Vish, you need to, there's an option to raise your hand. Otherwise, I won't know.
I think Ujjwal, he's left.
No, he is here.
No, he's here.
Sir, I think you have muted your mic. You need to unmute it.
Professor
And I was trying to see, and
Yes.
my hand is raised. At the moment, I don't want to say anything.
Okay.
I mean, it bugs to know that you keep the hand up for 15 minutes, the hand pains, and the person who conducts a meeting doesn't even bother and goes on a soliloquy for minutes and then that's still my hand off. And I don't like this way of conducting. I'm very sorry to say this. I told this to Raj, and I'm telling you now in front of everybody. I'm very unhappy.
Well, I apologize.
I don't come to a meeting to be insulted and keep holding your hand like this for 15 minutes.
No,
I'm
but
I
very
make a
sorry,
statement, you put your hand up, I'll call you. And that never happened.
Sir, I meant electronic hand. Did you raise your electronic hand?
Listen, when you say hand, you have to say which hand.
Electronically.
I'm uneducated, right?
I'm sorry.
Unlike you. I'm uneducated like you.
I'm sorry.
I need to do that.
Apologize.
I tried, I made a noise, still no response. Then I shut everything and went off.
And I'm very glad I persuaded you to come back. Is it possible for you to share your opinion? What is your...
Sure. That is one thing which people have been pushing around.
Yeah.
Senior citizen. It's a senior citizen who gets hurt maximum. Australia has a data, 57% of affected people are below 30.
Right.
New Zealand has a data to the same extent.
Yeah.
I can quote few other countries. And US has a study which breaks this myth out of shape. They say that it is incorrect to make such a statement. A quack study is what it should be, which had led to this thought that the senior citizen who get affected. Why is it that people are pushing this agenda through? Is it that it's easy to sell medicines there? It's a senior citizen who get affected very easily in the sense of confidence. Or is it that the medical pharmacy want to push the medicine? So if I do this, young people go berserk, get sick, and the medicine gets sold. Right? I mean, it's like if I don't know how many of you have read this. The Brahmanism moving into preventing cow eating came from having to be one ahead of the Buddhas. Buddha doesn't talk about don't eat cow. Doesn't talk about don't eat this or don't eat that meat. It only talks about do not kill when not necessary. He doesn't talk about cow hatya against cow hatya. But the Brahmin community among the Hindus have to do it to show they're one ahead of Buddha. Right? There's also another story that Buddhists went through this because they found commercially it is more viable to sell the meat because there are people who need meat more than I do. I can live on farm products. Desist from eating meat, you'll sell it. Again, that was done to sell meat, to make commercial sense. Are they doing the same thing with COVID also? Let the youngsters go berserk, they'll get sick because there are not enough old people to go berserk.
So your point is that they are highlighting senior citizens in order to get more funding, to sell more medicines. It's possible. What does everyone else think? Anita, what is your take on this? Sharda?
There is an insurance. They want you to take COVID insurance now.
They want you to take COVID insurance.
Yes. Agents are ringing up all seniors and saying, would you like to take? See, there is a new industry around the block across. Now insurance will boom. The industry will boom now.
Why? Doesn't the normal insurance cover it?
No, it doesn't.
No.
It doesn't.
So you have to pay another fat premium in order to get covered.
Yes.
How cute. Yeah, and I'm not surprised at all.
Yes.
And if I remember right, it's also age-related.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sharda had her
The
hand
older
up.
you are, the higher is the premium.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
That goes without saying. Okay.
So if I scare the senior citizen, I get that much more money.
That's a good one. Yeah. Sharda?
While I do agree that there have been several attempts by the COVID promoters or whatever, the medicine mongers, on various kinds of rumors, the fact of the matter is COVID is indeed an extremely infectious disease. And if your immunity is weak, you are bound to be more vulnerable. And therefore, to kind of dismiss it as saying that, it's all of it is a ploy to kind of, get more insurance and to, keep the senior citizens worried and, get them to pay more for various kinds of insurance packages may not be entirely correct. However, there was a very interesting article today in the Hindu, which I think many of you might have read, which did say that post-COVID, the number of knee replacement surgeries, the number of cesarean deliveries, the number of stents on heart patients have all gone down, which comes to a number of regular tests being taken by the senior citizens. The regular 1,000 tests that most doctors ask you to take. Many of the tests have also gone down. So does that mean that we were always being over-medicated and we were being completely controlled by this entire mafia of the doctors who kind of forced every second woman to a cesarean delivery, forced everyone with a slightest chest pain to have stent into his heart? So, there are several theories about corona, and I think corona is probably bringing out certain myths of the medical world, which might actually help us in the long run. However, I think that even senior citizens, as long as they maintain their immunity levels, keep their spirits high, keep their minds happy, I do think that, as you say, statistics don't prove anything. Very often, it's the young who have also been affected. Thank you.
Deepak?
As someone who is on the cusp of middle age and old age, I think I should be worried too.
Actually, sir, I have observed this very lately because, a sort of another perspective, adding to how like this entire interesting conversation around older citizens is that recently with this the medical centers not giving like chances for all the people, they don't have actually enough capacity, or if they do, they are charging too much for like admitting people. And I can observe this, like the priority that has been given to senior citizens has dropped down so much. Like they have gotten into this kind of a mantra that these people are anyway, they have lived their lives, they are anyway, close to what they would be living. So why give them the equal medical care? I have observed this kind of, nature of hospitals, like very like reputed hospitals like Mac and Apollo, where, recently my Nanaji had an entire left body paralysis. And he was kept on wait just because he was not at priority as other, corona patients. I mean, they had an entire corona wing. And like, this is a really, really saddening position that I've observed, that with this corona situation, like with all the attention apparently which is being given and caregiving to like these senior citizens, while, asking them to be defined in their homes, like the kind of attention that they should be receiving and the kind of priority they should be receiving for medical care, like they're not getting it. So it's like really ironic.
Rupal, thanks for your feedback. So what is the point that you're making vis-a-vis what Professor Vish started a few minutes ago? And then there was Sharda's response. So what are you trying to say, Rupal?
I'm adding on another perspective to this idea that, all these like medical agents, they are trying to get, trap all the people above a certain age to get all like all the insurances, and that involves medical, like involves senior citizens to get better medical care, and all this special COVID insurance. But the priority that has been given to senior citizens at like even big shot hospitals systems and like medical system right now is really low, which is like on ground reality, which is like really saddening.
Yeah. Sharda, you have your hand raised. Sharda?
Actually, I just wanted to go back. I wanted to go back to what Ujjwal had started about the urban spaces, and probably ask Ujjwal and some of you who are more experts in the field, what exactly do you mean by urban space? Because when there are people who belong to affluent homes like us, obviously the whole idea of an urban space is completely different from that of the migrant worker or the slum dweller. Because for him, when you talk of distancing, or when you talk of the safety of your homes or the confines, very often their homes are such congested 10 by 10 foot homes with so many the whole infection risk and the whole threat of catching the virus is far greater if they remain confined in their homes. And I think this whole exodus back to the villages was also probably driven by that very thought, that they were all staying in places where they would have never been able to escape the disease had they continued staying there during the peak of the pandemic. And now, of course, many of them have gone back and unfortunately infected several other villages and bee cities. But I mean, I just wanted your perspective on it.
Sharda, I'd like to say just one thing and then turn it over to Ujjwal. And that is you said something very important, with the implication of which is the lockdown is really the luxury of the rich. To preach a lockdown in the Dharavi slums of Mumbai can be a disaster. It's best that you stay outdoors. It's best that you mingle in a park rather than stay indoors with 40 other people in the same room. It's safety only if you're middle class and above. Likewise, those who clamor for more lockdowns for safety are clearly those who are economically privileged, because if you are not economically privileged, you are start thinking about things like rent. I have lower middle class friends who are seriously worried about the rent and about their businesses, and wanting special permits.
Sorry, but even something like home quarantine.
Or even something like home quarantine.
Home quarantine in a home where you have a bathroom and a bedroom to yourself is a very different concept from a home quarantine where you have to share with 10 other families and you have a common toilet to share. So the whole concept goes for a toss then.
Yes.
I think these are great points, because they do connect to the basic theory that I talked about in terms of the production of space. I think the point in that was that it is indeed created by, it is dependent on social relations. And while I was just going to talk about this dialectic between outside and inside, and sort of, I won't go over it again, but the sort of the conclusion from it is that there is this phenomenological sense of space itself that, yes, when we talk about, this discussion, the space that we're talking about, it's sort of, we're exercising some sort of authority, or at least in terms of what these people are having to, circumscribe to. But that's a good point. I think it is dependent on each person's relations, and wherever they go, if they're inside or outside, for them, everything, I think, I actually, it's a good question. It's kind of like, I'll think more about it as well, but I think it is
more dependent, instead of these abstract phenomenological categories, which are bullshit in the context of this lockdown. I think to think more of an economic class, to go back to Marxism, to go back to economic theories, because what Sharda's point was extremely well taken. If you're living in a comfortable space, which most of us are, looking at the pictures of your living rooms, bedrooms, or wherever you happen to be right now, presumably most of us are at home. There's no, I think a lot of the lockdown mentality and the home quarantine and all that makes sense in that sort of space. But if you're living in a slum in Mumbai, in a chawl in Mumbai, to talk about quarantine, to talk about lockdown, to talk about loss of livelihood, to quote, protect life, is absolutely meaningless. So the whole dialectics of space, in and out, gets transformed by one's class membership.
Yes.
What do you think, Ujjwal?
Well, I can just point to what Bachelard talked about.
Economic class.
So he gave, one of the solutions he gave was that architects should, when they create architecture, right, they shouldn't just be so obsessed with the geometric categorizations which are imposed by the sort of, this imposing sense, but they should look at personal and emotional responses to buildings that people give. So there's more care to be given to those experiences of the people. Every individual counts in that. And
and also the class of people. It's not just individuals in the void. It's also my economic class and what I can afford, and how many days I can afford to go without a paycheck. Some of us are lucky enough that we don't even have to think about that.
Right. I mean,
I think that's true of the vast majority of people who participated in this forum, and perhaps a few who are listening to this recording. But for those who are not, my deepest empathy for you, because I realize that many of these debates about lockdown or not, quarantine or not, self-quarantine, are meaningless. I mean, as Sharda points out, it is connected to economic class.
Yeah. Perhaps
it is connected to whether you have the means to be able to afford a lockdown. I mean, for those who say, Anita, I read your Facebook posts, it's not just you. There are so many eco-romantics who talk about the wonderful views from outside and how unpolluted everything is. To actually be able to appreciate such luxuries implies that one is fairly well off. If I'm a migrant laborer struggling to get back to my village in UP, I couldn't care less whether I could see the Himalayas from Jalandhar, thanks to the lockdown, thanks to the lack of pollution, lack of cars on the roads, creating this kind of marvelous view. I'm more concerned about getting back and the dynamics of how I'm going to survive next month. That's much more important. So this whole inner outer space, I think, needs to give way to the precedence of economic spaces and economic class. What am I doing in vis-a-vis the ownership of the means of production? Do I have a role, however humble, as one of the lackeys, one of the servants of the great capitalist machine, or don't I? What do you think?
I take all your points.
If we were not sitting in our comfortable living rooms, would we have the luxury of contemplating, how nice it would be if this continued to where I could work in my pajamas? It's very nice going to online concerts. you try telling an UP laborer about the benefits of online concerts, right, Ram?
So I see a few hands raised. Ms. Sharda, do you want to speak? Your hand is raised.
I finished. Thank you.
Ram is next.
Yeah. I was going to say that I don't think this lockdown and talking about the economic class between that is the migrant laborers and the interior villages and the people like basically us who are in the urban space. It is not exclusive to the the lockdown, quarantine, coronavirus. I think it every time it rains, if you go to a village where they'll be extracting the salt from water, it basically it goes useless for them because it rains. So even on a normal day, so it's not something as if it's exclusive to the lockdown and stuff. But on the other hand, but then if we go to a it's nice to look at in a retrospective to look at whether the Marxist way of doing it might actually look at how you how the ownership of at that point of time it was land, at this point of time it will be something else. But I'm not suggesting.
Let me just interrupt you briefly and clarify that I didn't mean only Marxist.
Right.
I meant
exactly.
I meant economic theory beginning, let's say, with Marxian theory,
right.
but coming to a kind of a new left view or a new left liberal perspective, where one I don't think either Sharda or I can be called a card-carrying Marxist, but I don't think one has to be one to be sensitive enough to appreciate the argument. And yes, you're quite right. It applies to sectors outside of Corona as well. I can afford to be a Tagorean romantic and love the rain, which I do, in the snug comfort of my middle-class home, looking out of the windows that have been cleaned recently. But if I were living in a slum where the water is pouring in through the roof, my Tagorean romanticism vanishes to be replaced by an acute horror that I'm out of buckets without a hole in the bottom, to siphon off this water.
At the same time, going back to something like the 1930s, Mark Twain, Gilded Age kind of thing, is not the answer.
Before the 1930s, but anyway, go ahead.
So it isn't, you can't go back to that. That is again going to result in only, the same kind of, nonsense that we are, at the moment struggling from. But at the same time, as you said, there has to be a new way of conceptualizing how to go about this, rather than going back to when we look at it at retrospective, it sounds really it might sound progressive at some points of time. It might actually sound regressive, both the left side and the Alfred Marshall kind of capitalism. But that needs, as you said, it needs a kind of a midway or a new conceptualizing of the the way of going about it.
Yeah. Vish, you have a lot to say about these things. What do you say about the whole class argument that lockdowns are a luxury of the middle class and the rich? And a lot of the measures in place to keep us in quarantine, to prevent the disease and so forth, are really class skewed and certainly class oriented.
The whole issue starts with migrant labor. 80% of migrant labor are construction labor. And the construction lobby was getting to be extremely politically strong. Right? How to clip their wings is delay the whole announcement about the migrant shift. If you notice, the government never talked about this till it was too late. And then they made statements about the government will put 85% of the railway fare, when 85% of the railway subsidy already exists. They were not giving 85% of the 15% that is charged. They still are talking the same subsidy and cheating people. All it was doing was creating an issue, controlling the lobby. Who worries about labor class? Labor class is that to be stomped on, right? The lockdown is only for you and me. I don't lose salary. I get my salary complete. I don't go to office, right? I can stay at home in my lungi and not worry about it. But can a labor do that? He doesn't work, he has no food.
Or even someone running a typing agency, someone running a small business that's struggling to survive and that's desperately looking for police permits to keep their business open at least for a few hours so they can make a few bucks.
They don't get enough food, their immunity goes down. They become a good target for this infection.
Yeah.
Let them work.
But it's not only the desperate situation of the laboring class, it's also the lower middle class, what Marx would call the petty bourgeoisie. Yeah, which again is suffering acutely because of all these well-meaning lockdown measures and so forth. Yeah.
Correct. Lockdown helps only upper middle class.
Right.
Not the lower middle class.
Yeah.
Good. Upper middle class, secure job. They're happy.
Yeah. Yes.
It doesn't hurt them. Right?
Lower middle class is the one that's and the working class, the unorganized sector, small businesses, startups, and of course the dirt poor who have nothing, who have no job to begin with. They are the ones who are really hurting both in the rural and in the urban sectors. But the rest of us are not hurting. I mean, we can afford the luxury of debating lockdown or no lockdown.
And this is a class which does not financially contribute to political campaigns.
Watching all this COVID-19 terror news, every day tuning into Channel 9 to get more of the same. Do you know 1,05,000 died recently? Well, you don't realize that that's only 2% of the total population that contracted COVID-19. That they don't tell you. So all of a sudden you say, my God, 200,000 people dead, I'm going to be next. Tomorrow it could happen to me or to you, Deepak. Right. And there's no way we can fasten our seatbelts and guard against the disaster. I mean, at that point, it does become a farcical theater of the absurd production. And it is. Very Beckettian.
Go ahead, you have your hand raised. Do you want to speak?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
So moving forward, what I do see happening, I mean, I don't call it a prediction or I don't want to give any phrases, but what I think will happen going ahead is that at any public space, there will be a restriction of how many people can be in that given area. And the other thing that I see happening is a lot of companies cutting their costs for transporting employees to their campus. And I think the companies might even start providing internet facilities or better infrastructure related to technology to their employees so that the work can be completed from home rather than the employee traveling. The flip side of this, however, is the employees who need to physically be at the workspace to get into that zone of focus, to get into that area of work. So this, I don't know how this segregation or this division is going to be made, because one decision is not going to suit everybody. So these are some of the thoughts that I have of how things would look like moving ahead. But there are definitely going to be people who are the winners, and there are going to be the people who are going to get severely affected by any decision made.
Yeah.
So
and in the process, many of us might lose our zest for going and sitting in a movie theater and eating popcorn. We'd much rather have a Zoom conversation, munching on popcorn, sipping a Coke or a beer in our own living room space, doing our own thing in our own pajamas, not dressing up to go anywhere except maybe once a year. Going back to the old bad normal, oh God, I've got to put on clothes again.
Or perhaps we'll hate it. We'll have had enough of it. We just want to go out. You know?
Yes.
Perhaps that could be.
I hope so. Vasanthi and I are certainly ready.
I want to get on a plane and go somewhere. Damn it, I don't care
Good.
where.
Without any mask.
I don't care. With a mask, maybe. But I just want to.
You're way too generous. I'm not.
I think one of the major concerns at least that I'm going to have is whether, like, to find, on the first day when I go out, maybe to my office, to find clothes that fit.
Ms. Gargi, you have your hand raised. Do you want to speak? Please go ahead. Ms. Gargi.
Gargi, let's listen to Dr. Gargi.
Yes.
This was in connection with what goes ahead, and it's just a simple example I want to give. There's a person who had been working in our college. He was not unemployed. He was selling bhel puris, and the COVID affected him. He was there 7 days a week because on holidays also we had IGNU or non-college aid.
Yeah.
And
Are you working at You're talking about IGNU now, Indira Gandhi National Open University.
Yes.
I can hear you now. I can hear you much better than I did when your image was playing.
Go ahead.
Because the Wi-Fi is fluctuating.
Yes.
But
these glitches are very common in Zoom conversations. Yeah.
I'm just now cutting it short. There's a person who used to work 7 days a week and daily earn money. And we who call ourselves an intellectual lot, it never struck us what is going to happen to that person now.
Yeah.
Because the colleges are closed and that was his main source of livelihood.
On the other hand, Gargi, it seemed to me that you mentioned IGNU. Now, someone working for a virtual university like IGNU would not be affected. Huh?
No, I'm talking about 7 days a week, 5 days college open.
Yeah.
One day there are non-collegiate classes, so students come.
Yes.
Sunday, so IGNU classes are held, so 7 days a week he used to earn money.
Okay. You're talking about your work. Are you talking about right now? Are you talking about your working career? I'm very confused.
Who was earning money day to day?
When you were working at Jesus and Mary.
I'm talking of Jesus and Mary College.
Yes, because you never provided any context. You were speaking in a void.
No, that's because the voice was breaking.
Yeah,
but
okay.
Even without a context, it can be that there is a person we all know who's been working on daily basis, and it never struck us that the COVID would have affected him. That's because we are so cushioned.
Yes.
We did think of our maids, etc.
Yeah.
It just happened that an ex-student chanced in meeting her when the lockdown, the lockdown was partially removed.
Yeah.
But people are not eating from outside, so no one was even buying anything from him.
Yeah.
And these young students who have left college, but they met him. They were so fond of his food items because they were bhel puri and chaat, etc.
Yeah.
They put it on Facebook.
Right.
And they contacted one another by Facebook. Even I shared it then with others.
Yeah.
And within 2 days, 48 hours, they got 2 lakhs collected.
Correct.
And that person was literally in tears because he had a teacher of ours then went and met him where he had put his stall. So he said no problem about living.
Yeah.
Because his house happened to be his own. But there was no work and there is no chance of work till December in any educational institute.
No, this kind of tragedy happens a lot of times. I mean, this is what Deepak and I were talking about.
We are just
I mean, this is not new.
There is something that we need to do also.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's it's very tragic, and he's one of the many victims of such tragedy. Anita, I see, has gone off the rails. No, you're back. You keep
I'm
flickering
back.
in and out like the grin of the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland.
How do I speak? How do I speak to all of you? I can't understand.
I didn't expect your accent to be any different from your posts on Facebook. But it is wonderful seeing you, if not live in the flesh, at least on the screen, on a Zoom screen.
No, I don't. I need to talk. How do I talk? How do I speak?
So you're talking just fine. There is no existential problem.
No, I need to talk. I don't know how to talk into this phone or whatever.
You're talking just fine. You're like the character in Moliere's play who was talking prose all his life, but didn't realize he was talking prose. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Yourself, how can I talk on Zoom? And you're talking on Zoom.
Okay, that's great. I have no idea how to do this Zoom, so I was just trying to listen first to see how it is that you talk.
My cousin Sharda, who's sitting in the corner there, that window. I hope you can see her. Yeah, she's waving at you, Anita. But she initiated me into Zoom some weeks or months ago, and since then I've been on Zoom conversations with all and sundry. So now I'm very easy with it.
It's your second nature. Yeah.
Yeah, it just takes practice. Initially, it feels a little weird when you see all these different faces. It's not like a one-on-one Skype conversation. It's a lot more because you see all, and then you have all these windows popping up and little text messages coming in from different people saying, "Sorry, I have to leave" or whatever, or they just leave. Like Drew just left.
Listening to Gargi Jain, something struck me in terms of attitude. There are people who still get their salary, but refuse to pay the maid and say that you can't come to work. Since you don't come to work, you don't get your salary.
Right, which is terrible. At the very least, you should pay them. If you're that concerned about your health, you should pay them.
Correct. Secondly, about he has left anyway. We're talking about going further up. About 8-10 years ago, because of paucity of working space, IBM made a decision. IBM made a decision. Certain percentage of employees were called consultants. They did not have a space.
Right.
They would come to office only if needed. Rest of the time, they'll work out of home. Let's say in the software IT industry, you don't need to come to office.
Correct.
If that thought gets into most of the industry, where you don't need to have a day-to-day 24/7 work. One, pollution will be cut down. Traffic on the road will be reduced. Accidents will go down. Right? Things will become much better.
And corporates would save, corporates would save billions of rupees. That's the bottom line. I was talking to my HDFC banker, who was kind enough to see me live in spite of the crisis, and most of his fellow employees staying at home. But he did see me, and we went into a kind of a private enclave, preserving social distance and wearing our masks. And he said one of the advantages that's going to come out of all this, IT companies are looking at this, is they've already saved billions of rupees in overhead, simply not having to pay for the AC and for transportation and all of that. So even if they pay their employees, it's a fraction of the total cost of running those expensive tech parks and buildings. Building size can be cut down to a bare minimum, a very comfortable workspace, certainly, but a bare minimum. You don't need a tech park. You need one floor in somebody else's office space. That's all you need. Yeah, so unless you want to tom-tom yourself to the world, there's absolutely no need for Infosys to have a huge campus anymore. They can have a small one-floor office and tell most of their employees to work from home and maybe come in once a month. And not to collect their paycheck, because all that would be done electronically. Yeah.
That's what we need to have going ahead.
Right.
A day or two a week is all that you need to physically go somewhere.
Right.
Sit at home and do your work.
Yes. Yes.
So I
I
think
would
But
think
I
they
think
won't
it would be a disaster. Academically speaking, it would be a disaster. I want to ask Ujjwal whether he would miss regular physical classes, seeing physical faculty in the flesh, or would you be satisfied with an endless diet of Zoom classes or classes on Google Meet,
well, I
classes
think
on Skype?
yeah, I think I am a little influenced by the theories that I've just read about with respect to, for example, social space. I think it just feels different when I'm sitting in a class because, you know, I make certain decisions. Do I sit in the front bench or do I sit at the back? And all those decisions make a difference in my experience. So if I think about it from my own perspective, it is totally different. And online, again, I think online there can be miscommunications, right? I can get missed. I apologize to sir, but it's, you know, technologically I can miss. So, but physically, I think most of that can be resolved easier.
Yes.
I will certainly miss those physical, the conjunctive sort of the sense.
The days, you know, we just scratch our armpits now and again, and we continue with the lecture.
Ms. Sharda, please go ahead.
Well, I have
sound of someone throwing up in the corner?
really playing.
Yeah.
I'm really playing the leftist devil out here. But you know, when you talk of Zoom classes and online classes, let me share with all of you the experience of my maid's young little kid who Raj is familiar with, who is virtually like a foster daughter to me. And she has been having, though she's in class 2 right now, she has been having online classes. Now, you know, when you do not have a smartphone, and when both your parents have to work on a daily wage basis, and you are a little child, and you have no smartphone with you, you don't have any phone, you don't have internet, you don't have Wi-Fi, and you certainly don't have the experience to understand English if it is spoken too fast over a virtual space. It may become extremely difficult. In fact, I have written a long letter to the local MLA here, Mr. Saurabh Bharadwaj from the Aam Aadmi Party, to tell him that these government schools and the private schools where you have these EWS category children, the online classes are of absolutely no use, because until and unless they are provided with some kind of internet facilities, some kind of smartphones, how the hell do those little kids or even young poorer college students enjoy an online class? It's okay for our types to enjoy and speak about the joys of online classes, sitting on your, lying on your bed and lounging with your laptop on your tummy. But when the laptop and the internet are not available, and then you do not have space, and you have 10 people in the same room screaming around, how the hell are you going to listen to any online class? So let's not be too about online education.
No, I also agree that there is really, and I've attended so many seminars on distance learning, there is no substitute for classroom interaction. It's a question of the symbolic touchy-feely quality of a classroom. I don't mean literally touchy-feely, which is known politely as sexual harassment. I'm talking about metaphorical touchy-feely, because there needs to be that warmth of eye contact, of body language, of movement, interaction between instructor and students for a class to be a fulfilling experience. I think online instruction can get to be very boring. The instructor drones on and on and on because he or she is just talking to images on a screen, not to live warm bodies. And so there really is no substitute for classroom teaching. Even IGNU, which Gargi praised considerably, or she talked about IGNU. IGNU and other online universities realized this, and so they decided to have live Saturday seminars. IGNU has centers all over the country, for example, where students are required to attend live seminars 1 day a week, Saturday being an off day for most people. Working people can sit in on the online classes through the week and the videos and all that. And then Saturday, they have to deal with a live instructor at the center. who goes over the material again and tries to explicate it, but also get some kind of discussion going, especially in humanities and social science.
No, to add to what Raj was saying, undergraduate teaching on the net is ridiculous. Teaching is not telling the students what it is. Teaching is telling the students how to learn. You don't learn online classes.
Yeah.
The trick to learn, to understand, to question, then to explore is best done with eye contact in a classroom environment.
Yeah.
You know, I had a teacher, my PhD supervisor. He used to make a statement which I believe in. You learn in spite of the teacher and not because of the teacher. If the teacher convinces you, if the teacher convinces you this is the philosophy, this is the fundamentals, everything is lost. You need to question it. So in spite of what the teacher tells you convincingly about the rightness or wrongness, you question it and then learn. That's how you learn in spite of the teacher. That cannot happen online. And at the end of a class, when the students start arguing with you on the corridor, they learn 10 times more in that 10 minutes in 1 hour inside the classroom.
Right.
Right? That is needed.
So you would agree that going back to the COVID situation, if there is a post-COVID reality, as inevitably there will be following a viable vaccine, I think online teaching or a diet of exclusive online teaching would be a disaster. I think IT jobs online, going into the office once a week or once a month is fine, but classes do need to be in the flesh classes with an online supplement, not the other way around.
Correct.
Except for people who are working full time, for whom necessary evils like IGNU have to exist. You do need online universities and institutes to cater to their needs, or they wouldn't get any higher education at all. Yeah. So if you're lower middle class and you're struggling to improve your qualifications, a place like IGNU can be of great help. You can come home tired from work, but still discipline yourself to sit in front of that mobile or that laptop and, hammer away and get your online classes out of the way, and then go to the IGNU Center on a Saturday, take your classes and graduate. So, and some do that. But I think for the vast majority of us, call us privileged if you like, we do need the stimulus of live classroom instruction. There's no getting away from the old normal. The favorite meme of today, or one of the favorite memes, is BC standing for before Corona and AD after domestication, meaning after the whole stay-at-home ethos. But I think if we go back to BC,
before
Corona, I think we do need to go back to BC, in the teaching zone. I think in all other zones, especially IT, it's okay to work online. Yes, Ujjwal, we would very much like to see your resources. Perhaps you could share them via message.
Yeah.
And also reiterate those in comments on, the Facebook page and so forth.
Yeah, Dr. Gargi Jain wants to speak. Please go ahead. Unmute yourself first. Yes.
I think I didn't lower it after I spoke.
Oh, okay. So I'll just send just one link that I use mostly, the stand. So I think I don't even have to, okay, I'll just share the link of that website that I use. Additionally, for this talk, Rajay sir sent a few documents, which I don't have links to, but I'll share this one link, which is a repository of philosophy that I use.
Do you have the link to the European Journal of Psychoanalysis, where they had this wonderful online philosophers forum?
No, I don't have that.
Sorry, in-print philosophers forum for about 3 months. And it was a philosophers forum on Corona. In fact, if we're going to continue this discussion next week, I'd like to discuss some of the articles that were published in the European Journal of Psychoanalysis, where philosophers go back and forth and disagree with each other fiercely Agamben and Nancy and the feminist Julia Kristeva about the coronavirus and its implications.
Yes.
But if you have a link, Ujjwal, that would be terrific.
I don't have a link for that right now, but I sent a link, just a general repository website of great content. I use it a lot. So a lot of what
Yeah, but see if you can dig up the links for the other one, and we could at least put them on Facebook.
Yeah, I can do that. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll do it later. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, Vish, I agree with you. Online sources, yes, but not online courses. Or online courses only as a necessary evil. Yeah. As I said, if you are, working full time, you may have no alternative but online courses in order to get any kind of higher education. But aside from that, if you have the luxury, whether you're funded through scholarship or otherwise, to go to a college, there really is no substitute for live classroom teaching. Don't you agree, Gargi? I mean, as a long-term professor at Jesus and Mary, surely you have a view about this. Gargi, are you there? Hello? I guess
she's muted.
She's gone off the air. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's I have to say this. So we are towards the end of our discussion. Is that reasonable to say?
Yes.
Yes. I'm having gone on for nearly 2 hours, which is terrific.
Yes.
It implies that there's a great deal of budding interest in the Lunchbox Philosophers and the content of our discussions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyone, if for final comments, if anyone has them, and after that, I think Sir can sum it up. Just quick.
Okay, I'll just make one comment made by one of my teachers, right? I was talking to him. He's about 82 years old. And he was my teacher. I was talking about online courses and real-time classes. He says, you can slap a student awake with the way you present.
Yeah.
Online, you don't even know whether he's there or not. Who am I going to wake up? He could have put that record, logged in, and gone out of the room. You won't even know.
Yeah.
Right?
In fact, many online professors do use recordings.
Yeah, then
a
there's no
substantial part of the seminar. And then they come back and say any feedback, and then of course everyone's looking blank, and he or she just gives them an assignment for next week. I have taught online courses before using very primitive software like Angel and Blackboard. It's much more sophisticated now with Google Meet and so forth, but nonetheless, the principle is the same. Occasionally, because I would play devil's advocate even online, I would get a good online chat going. But there wasn't the same bonding with students that I had have in a regular classroom. Not at all. Gargi, when you went off the air, we had a question for you. As a long-standing professor at Jesus and Mary, would you agree that live instruction beats online instruction hollow any day? Unless online instruction is absolutely necessary. You're working full-time, in some low-paid job, and your only hope for getting a higher education or advancing your qualifications is through attending IGNU or attending some kind of online program. But don't you think that live instruction is far better?
Certainly, sir. Live expression is far better. Live classes are definitely better. But
Yeah.
I think we'll, if these conditions continue, something as a mix has to be there. And there are many reports that have come. There is digital fatigue.
Yes.
Eyesight of children is are getting bad. They are some of them losing sight because they are there continuously practically from 5 to 6 hours, and then later for the assignment they also have to work online.
Thank you, Sharda.
So I don't think 100% online class would work.
Okay.
It can,
But
it may
unfortunately,
work for Christians.
unfortunately, yeah. Go on, go on.
No, what I'm trying to say is that for higher education, and it's a proved UN report also, in formal classes, the informal learning is far more.
Yeah.
And in our country, the marginalized do not get proper education at the school level
Correct.
because of the different disparities. And it is only the generation which is now able to come to colleges that
Correct.
they are becoming a little more refined. They are learning many more things. They learn to converse, even if it is not in English. They learn to. There is much more, because in our college we've had a lot of first generation students coming to
Yeah.
college. They belong to children of rickshaw wala, sabzi wala, press wala, all those.
But you're saying, but you're saying that for all these people, live instruction is much better than online instruction, and even
right,
for the
sir, because
traditional.
you can't teach those things in an online class.
Yeah. Now, if it's unavoidable, like someone who is.
Yeah, this is an exceptional circumstance. But here again, the concept of equality, equal access to quality education has been affected because most of them do not have these facilities. We have a
No, but
colleague
if
who
I'm
is shifted
working,
to Muzaffarnagar.
no. You're not looking at ground reality. If I am a BCom graduate and I've just got myself a job, an ill-paid job paying 20 to 30,000 rupees a month as an accountant at an office, I may decide to work on a CA program or an MBA online in order to improve my qualifications. Certainly, I'm not going to make as much as an MBA from IIM Bangalore, but I'm going to do reasonably well. I'm going to move up to the 40 to 50,000 rupees a month bracket.
So that's what I was trying to tell
Sense,
you.
I'm not knocking online education.
The higher education is required, but if you're going to add on to your qualifications, then those online courses are an advantage. They are a plus. But those minimum degrees which are required.
If you're a working woman or man and you can't afford to leave your job and go back to college full time, that's it's pretty good. But I think otherwise there really is no surrogate for in-person flesh and blood teaching.
No,
In the flesh teaching. Yeah, there is a lot of difference.
Because the satisfaction, even as a teacher, you get more when you are seeing the faces of the students. You understand what is going, they followed you. Or their look tells you that they haven't understood.
Quite so. I think you, me, and Vish agree on that. And we are the three faculty members, if you like, that are in part of this discussion. Today, anyway. Yeah.
And I have retired, sir, but...
No, it's not a question of whether you've retired.
No, what
you still, once a faculty member, always a faculty member.
No, what I'm trying to tell you that these present circumstances also, because I had a TIA.
Fine. No, but we're not looking at your, we're not a hiring committee. We don't care if you're retired or not.
No, sir, I'm not talking of hiring. I'm trying to just tell you that our generation has also tried to become tech savvy.
Oh, we are tech savvy. I'm one of the gurus of Facebook. What are you talking about?
Sir, there are many things that
I post far more
now.
on Facebook than Ram and Ujjwal do. In fact, of late, I've curbed my addiction and, I'm on the reducing plan, but they know I can cook up a storm on Facebook. So I can outdo any one of them.
That's very true of you, sir.
So even though I'm not a digital native, I am digitally savvy. I'm not a Luddite, unlike many of my colleagues.
No. But sir, you are one of those few. Most people are not tech savvy.
Yeah.
Right? Yet in these times,
I think most people are becoming tech savvy of necessity now.
We have to. There's no choice.
Especially
We
in the
have to.
COVID context. If you are not tech savvy,
Yes,
if you don't have decent equipment, if you don't have a decent Wi-Fi connection, you are lost because you have nothing to do all day long. You know, you need a good.
It's kept us busy. It's kept us
Pardon?
busy online. I'm attending webinars. I'm doing some work. There is so much to do with. If the internet was not there, we would have gone crazy.
Yeah, but if the internet were not there, we wouldn't be taking this pandemic so seriously, perhaps, and things may be more normal. Yeah,
Oh, that's the other side of the story, because
one thing is for sure. We would treat it more, similar to a regular flu epidemic or something, and still go about our business.
Yeah. In
so the
terms
media,
of classes,
media over, what can you say? It tries to sensationalize. It is not sensitizing. It's sensationalizing and putting fear in people's mind.
Well, that's the whole point of all this propaganda. Yeah.
They are encashing on the pandemic in line with the authorities.
Well, that's a very Agamben-esque way of looking at things. The philosopher Giorgio Agamben, and Ujjwal started with him, did believe that governments are interested in creating states of exception so that they can suspend normal democratic functioning. Yeah, and constitutional
Yes, sir, that's
functioning.
very true. If you remember when there was scams, Sri Devi had passed away. The whole media was covered with Devi news. That was a very big diversion.
Yeah, it is. It was, but it is time for us to wrap up this discussion. And since Ujjwal asked me to wrap up we covered quite a lot of territory. We talked about Agamben. We talked about the poetics and phenomenology of space. We talked about the spaces that a working class person from UP, migrant to Bombay or Delhi, experiences versus the lived spaces that, let's say, someone who's rich or middle class does. We also said that the phenomenology of space cannot be disassociated from class. And then we went on to a discussion of the virtual and the real, and whether it was worth going back to the old normal. And how in some ways we are irrevocably changed. There are many corporations that may continue the work from home model well after a cure and or a vaccine for COVID is discovered. This might be the new post-COVID paradigm that's coming up. But we also concluded by saying that it would be a disaster for the post-COVID generation to go back to stay in this virtual education mode. I think we do need regular classroom instruction aside from whatever virtual props there might be. Distance learning has its limitations. With that, let's conclude today's discussion. It has been a pleasure interacting with all of you, and a very, very special hello to those who are listening to the recording. This has been recorded and will be played live on Facebook. I might even upload it to my YouTube channel to garner a wider audience. And so we hope you can join us next Tuesday, Indian Standard Time at 6 p.m. We will continue this discussion of COVID-19 and its philosophical implications, and we look forward to seeing you then. Bye for now.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.